Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Marty, and today we're gonna make a little bit of a comparison between analog and a digital mixdown. So the basic idea behind today's video is that I made a very rough mix on the console and the very same rough mix in the box, so just with plugins. And for the out-of-the-box mix I used the console behind me as well as a little bit of compression, so actually just subgroup or bus compression, and a little bit of EQ moves on the console. And I did the very same thing in the box just with plugins, where I used the very same VCA compressors, just this stock Logic compressor in the VCA mode, with the very same gain reduction, the same routing, and also the same leveling like I did on the console. And as far as EQ goes, I actually thought to myself, well, instead of using the stock Logic EQ or another third-party plugin, which kind of like is oftentimes a recreation of another analog old school EQ, I'm gonna use the Waves Q clone, which allows me to have the very same frequency curves as well as the Q. So we can have a really identical actually frequency response that I made with the analog console. What the Waves Q clone is actually not really capable of is capturing saturation as well as natural compression like you have on analog EQs oftentimes. But anyways, I thought it's a much better comparison to have the Q clone really copying the outboard frequency curve of the EQs instead of using a third-party plugin where we can't actually match the EQs. For example, like boosting a high frequency on an analog EQ like on the console is oftentimes much different than on the plugins, and we really can't compare them. So with the Waves Q clone, we have the very same EQ frequency-wise. All right, so I would say we're gonna start with the out-of-the-box mix. So I'm gonna show you a little bit around on the console and on the outboard compressors and what I actually did there. I'm gonna play you also a little bit of the song, so you actually know what we're dealing with. Then I'm gonna show you the in-the-box mix and the setup. And finally, we're gonna have the comparison between the digital and the analog mix. Right? So I would say, let's get started. All right, so I'm gonna play you now a little bit of the song and I'm gonna walk you through as it is playing a little bit through the setup. I don't want to go actually into details what I did on the EQs and so forth. As I said, this is a very rough mix. It's just for the purpose of this video to have a little bit of EQ moves and compression just to hear the difference between an analog and digital mixdown. As I said, I did this song 3 years ago. I used a hybrid setup actually, where I used the Logic plugins as well as third-party plugins with the console and also with outboard equipment like compressors and effects units. So nevertheless, let's get started. I'm gonna play the song. Starts with a piano. Okay, so let's turn that a little bit down. And so basically, I brought on the console the kick, snare, overheads, where I have also the hi-hat and the toms, room mic, percussion. There is also one bass track, acoustic guitar is summed to stereo pair, as well as electric guitars, piano, and the lead and the background vocals. And on all the different tracks, I did a little bit of EQ moves, where I mainly used just a little bit of a high-end or mid-frequency boost, or cut it some muddiness of like 250 or 200 out of certain tracks that I actually didn't like. As far as the auxiliary, so the effect sense goes, as I said, I used just a standard room reverb, so just one reverb here, just to give it a little bit of space and depth. All right, to get a little bit of a better view here, here are the different tracks. So the drums, bass, acoustic guitars, electrics, pianos, and vocals. And so the setup was here that I brought all the different tracks out on the console, and I used on the drums here parallel compression with a Alesis 3630, I'm going to show you in a minute. On the bass, a dedicated compressor, the FMR compressor, the really nice leveling amplifier. Acoustic guitars, electric piano, and lead vocals went to the same bass compressor, which is also a FMR unit, the really nice compressor in that case. As I said, very minor EQ moves, as you can see, just a little bit of a top end boost here and there, or cutting some frequencies, kind of like the muddiness of 200, 250, for example. And everything was actually done the very same in the box, as I said, with the plugins and the Waves Q clone, which I'm going to show you later on. Here is the bass compressor, which is a TLA A2 tube stage, so minor saturation. I use the EQ in the pre-mode, so before the compressor, and as you can see, just a little bit of a compression, so up to 2 dB in a ratio of 2:1, slow attack and fast release, and on the EQ side just a little bit of a low frequency boost, as well as a little bit of a high frequency boost, which is 12,000 Hertz in that case. Here is the bass compressor, the Elysis, so as you can see, pretty slamming. This one here, the RNLA, was used on the bass in the lock release mode, so to have a smoother release. And here the instrument and vocal bass compressor, again FMR, and in the super nice mode, where you can actually really don't hear how hard it's compressing, so there are literally no artifacts. Really good sounding compressor. And the Elysis MIDI Reverb here in the warm room setting, so didn't do much to that, right? Alright, so now let's solo, for example, the kick here just and the snare. So that's without EQ. And now with. Again. And with. Maybe let's also take, for example, the vocals. Let's play, for example, here the background vocals also. And without.
Oh, shall I tell you the story, how I finally got away?
Okay. Alright, so that was very quickly now the setup. I would say I'm gonna record now this whole song. Let's bring it up to a good level here and hit record, and we're actually gonna mix it now down. So everything goes through the tracks of the console, through the output equipment, and back on the stereo track into the DAW here in Logic Pro X, which is here the mixdown track, as you can see. And I would say I'm gonna let that run through, and then I'm back with the indie box session, so just with the plugins, and see how that sounds. Alright, so here is now the very same session, just with the plugins, so nothing goes out to the console or any outboard equipment. Setup is basically the same. For example, in the drums, I just used a little bit of a gain reduction, or actually gain boost, because the console is a little bit louder. And for example, here on the bass, I used the very same fader movements as well as on all the other tracks. For example, here acoustic guitars. Also the panning is the very same. So everything is identical volume-wise. And I also used the very same compressors. For example, here on the bass, I used a VCA compressor with the same ratio, same attack and release as I did on, for example, the FMR unit. Again, same gain reduction. Same goes here for the drums. I bust them out here to a parallel compressor, which is also a VCA. Same attack, very fast. medium release, and again, same gain reduction. I'm gonna show you it here. So as you can see, it goes up to -12, -15, same as on the hardware unit. All right. And on the vocals and also all other instruments, guitars, pianos, and so forth, they were actually grouped to an instrument bus here, which is again the VCA one, which is in my case a pendant to the FMR RNC, and it's compressing the very same up to 5 or up to 6 as we did on the real unit. Okay, and of course I also used a little bit of a room reverb. I tried to use the very same setting. Let's go here maybe, for example, to the drums. Here is the reverb, the overall. I used here the Studio A, which kind of sounded like the same as the MIDI verb. There's a little bit of a reduction here on the high end. The room reverb of the Elise is a little darker sounding, but overall tried to match it quite a bit. So just to get the same depth and the kind of like the same space for that, right? And as far as the mix bus goes, which is here, this track, I used for the tube stage, which of my TLA Ebony A2 has a dedicated tube stage, and I used here the plug and mix analoga, which I actually really like the sound of. You can use it here in a tube, in a tape, or a mixed, so I used it here in the tube stage. And pretty much I tried to really get close to the real unit. And with the Q clone, pretty much the same. A little bit of a low end boost and a high end boost. So later about the Q clone plugin and how to set it up a little bit later. And the compressor here, again, VCA1. I used just the ratio of 2:1. Same attack, 8 milliseconds and release of 200 as on the AT unit, right? And as far now as the EQ cloning plugin goes, the EQ clone of waves, it actually consists of 2 plugins. One is a transmitter and one is a receiver. So you basically create here a standard audio track with the Q capture, which is the transmitter. And this sends a constant signal anywhere you want, actually. You just have to route it to the output of your converter where the EQ, the hardware EQ, is actually connected to. And then it goes out of the hardware EQ back into the converter. And let's create here, just for the sake of it, a track. Let's say the input of the output, in my case here, is 1516. This is the EQ. And the output here of this track is just 2728, which is in my case here the monitoring track. And let's say here this is just a test track. And we're gonna insert here the Q clone. Let's take the stereo one here. And now all we have to do here is on the Q capture, where we have the transmitter, press it into the input monitoring. So now, as you can see, it's transmitting. And as I bring up the fader, you hear this weird signal that is a constant actually signal that is sent through the EQ here, and it goes back into the converter. And it is here, as you can see, on the Q clone plugin, on the test track that we now created, it's receiving here, right? And now, once I engage the EQ and press here capture, you can see we have a level. Let's bring it up to another level here, a little bit louder, right? And maybe let's do a little bit of a high-end boost. So as I turn up to 12,000 Hertz, it also is increased here. Or for example, the low frequency. Again, you can also cut it. or maybe a little bit of a mid-frequency boost. So you can really sweep through here, right? Works also, of course, with low cut, 75 Hertz, for example. So let's push anything in. And you can also disengage the EQ, so we have the standard frequency response here with 0. And once you are actually finished or happy with the sound, you can press hold and it gets saved. And you can disengage the track here of the Q capture, and the frequency response, so the curve here, is actually saved on this track. And this is basically the same that I did on all the different tracks here. So I did it on all the different EQs, and I did here basically the same now in the box wise as out of the box. So we have a really, really good comparison between analog EQ and also the digital one, right? So for example, here on the vocals, I boosted here on the vocals a little bit of a high-end boost, which is here also, very tiny amount, and a little bit more here on which is around 100, 120, and I also used the low cut, and here is also the low cut in the box, right? So I would say I'm gonna play you now a little bit of the song, and then we're gonna compare the two different mixdowns, so the in the box and the out of the box one.
Covered up with frozen hand, would you leave with me this land? Would you leave with me this land? Look, when we are together, the clouds are hanging there in vain. And I didn't say, oh no.
All right, so here is now the real comparison. Here is the digital track and here are the analog mixdown. As you can see on the VLM meter here, we have the actual pretty much the same loudness, -20, -20, exactly -20.5 here on the digital, and -20.4 LUFS on the analog mixdown. And here you can see the frequency response, pretty much the same on the lower frequencies, a little bit different here around 500 to 1000 Hertz, which you can see here on the analog is a little bit reduced, but the high frequencies are pretty much the same. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to play now the song, and I'm going to switch between digital and analog, and you can hear for yourself how they actually sound and what the difference is. All right, so here we go. Let's start with the digital one.
Keep it warm, I will not do you harm, not this time. Listen, I've discovered there's a place for us two. Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba. It's covered up with frozen hand. Would you leave with me this land? Would you leave with me this land? Look, when we are together, the clouds are hanging there in vain. And I didn't say, oh no, I'm not insane. I'm not insane, oh no. Bring it out, and tell me what's about to be kind. Drifting here in spaces between. There's a lot of things to do, and just hoping to be true. The company you keep me is more than I ever thought I'd gain. Not insane, oh no, I'm not insane, I'm not insane.
So, as you can probably hear, there is a little bit of a difference. In my subjective view, I think that the analog has a little bit more of a lively high end in comparison to the digital. And I also feel there is a little bit more depth in terms of the drums and also of the stereo image. What's interesting is, for example, here on the true peak level, so the peaks, we have on the analog mix down -6 and on the digital one -2. And even though I really tried to match the overall compression of the mix bus and also on the different tracks, actually really the same, we have different true peak level. And I think this might be due to the fact that there is a natural compression on the console and also on the outboard equipment, especially on the tube stage, that works a little bit different than the, for example, plug-in mix analoger plug-in. So we might have here a little bit more of a perceived compression, even though the overall compression on the compressors itself was the same. And what I basically also hear is that the analog mixdown sounds a little bit more punchy in comparison to the digital one. Maybe that the AT unit has a little bit of a different characteristic in regards of compression, even though I use the very same compression settings and also the same gain reduction that the metering says. Yeah, so that's the main difference that I hear. To say it with one or actually two words, the analog mixdown is a little bit more lively and a little bit more exciting to me. And this is actually really interesting, even though I use the very same moves on the faders and also the compressor plugins, for example, with the same gain reduction and the EQ, it sounds quite a bit different. But overall, the digital also sounds really good, and maybe with other third-party plugins, you really can get into the same kind of like domain as the analog mixdown. All right, so to sum it up now, there is a little bit of a difference between analog and digital mixing. But for me, it's actually just more a personal preference for using analog outboard equipment or a console. It surely takes a little bit more time, especially when you have to do recalls. So you have to recall the whole console and also the outboard equipment. But I really like the fact that having physical faders and, for example, having FX units patched in, so with a twist of a knob on the auxiliary send, I can send signals through, to a reverb or to a delay or a slapback or something like that. That's very handy and very easy to use. I also like the routing possibilities on the console as far as, for example, headphone mixes goes, or using different subgroups for different instruments. It's just with a press of a button to do, so very convenient. And of course, if I probably would have used more third-party plugins to simulate a little bit more distortion or saturation or natural compression, for example on the EQs, we would have been pretty much close to the analog sound. But anyways, I hope that you like this little comparison between analog and digital mixing, and I hope that it could give you a little bit of an insight how the analog mixing actually works. And so, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you like this video. And as always, happy recordings and see you in the next video.